But yeah, let's get into it. Episode 15 now. 15. Last week didn't bang as much as the previous weeks, did it?
I think that was the Zoom though.
Yeah, the sound quality, the video quality.
Joe said that when he was listening to it on Spotify, he almost turned it off after the first few minutes and said the sound sounded really bad, but it got better. So
Fair.
we should be back up to the thousands this week.
Oh yes. We didn't get thousands, did we?
Nah,
No.
I think we got 300 on one of them now.
Fair. We'll do our best. Talk about some clickbaity stuff as well. But yeah, the whole overall quality of that was just
Yeah, it
dog
wasn't
shit.
the best, but now we know.
Right.
Yeah, what's been going on, Char?
Nothing, just life, pretty standard, pretty boring. One thing I was going to ask you about, Bill, was the topic of today's conversation is ADHD. Let's start with Billy. You have ADHD, don't you?
I do, yes.
ADHD, mate. I just think he's a bit of a twat, but yes, growing up with it and that, and then I've got some interesting, I would say statistics, but I don't know the statistics off heart. So just some things I've heard and that. So
Just some things I've heard and that.
no, so like things I've heard on podcasts. Sorry, but yeah, what was it like? Being diagnosed. I don't know if you remember being diagnosed with ADHD, because it's not a disease, is it? Not in the sense of fucking like heart disease, but it's not.
It's
not
a mental illness.
Yeah,
Because it can link in older age quite strongly to like obsessive disorders, OCDs, things like that. I don't remember I was diagnosed very young. My mum knew. My mum's a teacher and she's very good at identifying kids and why they behave as they behave. And I think because she actually teaches because she cares, I've had very few teachers that are actually like her in terms of actually trying to understand what's going through a kid's head rather than just branding them as being misbehaving or whatever. And she just knew. She had been obviously before she had me anyway. She had taught kids that she did research on and thought they probably have ADHD. And when I was very young, like even toddler age, she always said like I knew you had it. You couldn't sit still. I could never sit still as a kid. Especially when you know you're meant to be sitting still, like if you're in, I don't know, church or in an area sitting in the classroom, whatever it is.
I went to church.
No, I mean just an area like that where you're meant to. I mean, I wasn't a churchgoer either, but I imagine you're meant to just sit there and you listen to.
Yeah.
So she just always knew. So I don't remember being diagnosed. I was diagnosed very, very young, but the attitude around ADHD, I think, has got better. When I was a kid, you were just naughty. Like a lot of the teachers would just say you're naughty, you're badly behaved. It was tough. I won't lie. It was really tough growing up with it because it's like I've always struggled to sleep, always, because there's just a million things spinning around my head constantly. That comes down to the ADHD. It takes me a few hours to get to sleep most nights. If I go to bed at like 10:30, I'm realistically only falling asleep at like 1:30 most nights. Like I really struggle to fall asleep because I struggle even now at my big age to just lie there with my eyes shut and try and sleep. If I'm shattered, yeah, because that's what you do. If you're shattered, right? If I'm shattered, obviously I thought you can just fall asleep. If I know I've got to be up for work and I'm not necessarily shattered, but I should go to sleep now, sort of thing. I just struggle with the lying there and just keeping your eyes shut. I cannot sleep.
Well, in all situations, or just
Most situations, unless I'm battered.
Yeah.
Or like proper shattered, like it's been a really long day's work and I get home shattered and I want to go to sleep. In most situations I still struggle to sleep. And as a kid, my mum always tells me a story of like she could hear me awake just tottering about my room because I couldn't sleep. I could never sleep. She'd be like, Billy, just lie down, close your eyes. I do, I would say. Apparently I close them but they just pop open again.
Did you not get that? You go to sleep, right? Put you to sleep.
No, that was my dad, not my mum. But no, so it was tough. Like I could never sleep. I really, really struggled to concentrate in any situation. Like if someone's speaking to me, even I'd just be dazed. Like you might be speaking to me. It happens to me now. You might be speaking to me, but I'm thinking of something else in my head completely, and I struggle to concentrate on one thing or another.
Do you think are these actually traits of ADHD? Because I'm not trying to underplay it, but I feel like a lot of people do these things. If I'm sitting there talking to you, I could be thinking about something else, or it's actually, which I'll talk about in a minute. Sorry to interrupt, because that is one thing I was thinking. A lot of people be like these days, oh, I've got ADHD, or they'll chuck the ADHD label on themselves or whatever. Say all these things, and it's like, well, I do those things, and I am 99.9% sure I do not have ADHD.
Yeah. No, I think it's just intensified. Of course, there's certain things that I do that probably most people do, but like as a kid, I was very naughty. I could not concentrate at all in any situation. I could never sleep. I could never get to sleep because there's millions of things buzzing around my head. It's like in kids in particular, it's not being able to, like, for me, it was also massively defiance. And defiance is something that ties into it quite heavily, where I don't like being told what to do. And if someone tells me to do something that I was going to do anyway, I now don't want to do it because someone's told me to do it.
Just that stubbornness.
Yeah, really bad stubbornness. And I could just never concentrate. I could never sit still. I could never concentrate. I've always struggled to sleep. I've always struggled with being told what to do. And people might listen and say, yeah, no, I do those things. It's just intensified, like horrifically intensified. At the end of the day, if a kid's not concentrating usually and you shout at them, sit still, and they get told off for sitting still, what are they going to do? Sit still. What are they going to do? Concentrate on what you're telling them. I had an inability, like I couldn't. You can shout at me as much as you want. You can punish me as much as you want. I could not do these things. And I've named a few there, but realistically, I was such a badly behaved child. There was loads of stuff that I couldn't do. But it's that inability. It's not like a naughty child is someone who you tell them not to do something and they do it. They've listened to what you say. They know there's going to be repercussions, but they make a conscious decision to, well, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to do it. With me, it was just an inability. Like I would get urges to do things. Like you get urges to do naughty things. You get urges to not listen to people. You get urges to speak without putting your hand up first, or not do the work that's been given to you because something else looks a bit more. Something else has caught your eye and you can't concentrate, etc. And the attitude around it is, like, even when I was a kid, it was horrendous. Like, when you said to me earlier in the week about wanting to, speak about this topic, I looked up, like, just a few bits on Google to see, like, what sort of stuff. And there's an article from 2005. Right, we was born in 97, right? Yeah. So I would have been 8 at this time. And that was at my height. Like, that's when I struggled badly, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The article headline is "Not ill, just naughty." Leo, whatever, on the scandal of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, whereby parents are paid to bring up their children badly, right? And in this, he goes through, like, basically, I read the article and he's just basically slating it and saying, is your child doing this because they have ADHD? No, it's because they're naughty. No, it's because you're not punishing them. And I think where it's really, going back to what you said a minute ago about, oh, I do those things. If you look at, I had the same upbringing as my brother. He could behave, he could concentrate, he could do these things. I couldn't. Yeah. So I think the attitude, it was really difficult, especially because you're impatient and, like, all of this stuff. Certain things I stopped doing as I matured. Like, I was a really badly behaved kid at school. And then as I matured, obviously you sort of pipe down on certain things, but there's still certain things that, like, impatience is a massive thing. I'm still very impatient. I still really struggle to sleep. I still struggle to concentrate unless something actually engages me. If something engages me, then, but if not, I really struggle. And I probably can't do it justice saying, like, how it made me feel as a kid, etc., because I don't really have the words, but, like, you're very different to just a badly behaved kid who struggles to concentrate. Like, it's massively intensified, and it is a real thing. But the attitude back then was that you were just badly behaved. So a lot of teachers could not be bothered to deal with it because they just thought, well, this kid's badly behaved, like, I'm not pandering to it. And I had some really good teachers in my time who understood what ADHD was and understood how to deal with me, and they loved me. Like, I got along with them like a house on fire. I concentrated during their lessons. I listen to them because they treat me with respect. That was a massive thing. The defiance thing was massive for me. Like, even as a 6-year-old kid, like, I never cared that, like, that person's a teacher, I'm a child. It'd be like, if you speak to me rudely, you're getting it back. Even as a kid.
How to at that age?
I don't even know. No, I could, mate. If the reprimand was that I was going to get a fucking whack from my dad, I would not care. I would not, even at a really, really young age, I would not allow myself to be spoken to like shit. I was defiant. I didn't like being told what to do. Unless you spoke to me with respect, I would never speak to you with respect, type thing, even as a kid. And that ties into it quite a bit as well. But yeah, it was really difficult growing up, especially with, like, my mum was super patient, and my mum knew me to a T. So when I'd get in trouble at school, my mum always knew I was really honest. Like, if I did something wrong, I would say, yeah, no, that was my bad. I'd always own up to it. So when I said at school I didn't do that, I was an easy target to say, this has happened, it must have been him, because he's the naughty, like, he's naughty, right? He's the badly behaved child. And my mum would just say, and what did he say? No, well, he says he doesn't do it. And she'd say, there's your answer. Yeah, but, he was only in trouble too, blah, 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 blah. And she'd just be like, how come every time you catch him doing something he's done, or you accuse him, why would he say, yeah, I did that, but in this instance he's saying, no, I didn't? So she understood me to a T. But even my dad was horrendous with me. He had no patience, used to get frustrated with me. And it's stuff that I couldn't help as well. It wasn't just that I was purposely ignoring what he said, or purposely wasn't concentrating, or it was just something that was in me. And he was really quite poor with me, to be honest. But my mum was great. So she encouraged a lot of teachers to actually listen a bit and understand it a bit more. And I even remember when I was in year 9, a teacher I really got on with, he said to my mum at parents' evening, right, I'll be honest, when I see that he'd picked to study business studies or whatever, and he was in my class, I was absolutely dreading it, because from what loads of other teachers say about him, I thought he was a little shit, and the way they spoke about him, he sounded horrible, blah 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 blah. But he's been like an absolute delight to teach. He's super engaged, blah 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 blah. And he blew my trumpet, but imagine me sitting there thinking,
no wonder you got along with him.
Well, no, don't.
God knows what.
That's unofficial.
You went to a Catholic school, innit?
But he and I was just sitting there thinking, like, while that's great, the fact that other teachers are just saying I'm a little shit, why don't you put a bit more effort into teaching people who are struggling with stuff? So my mum always was. My mum helped me through a lot. And I think if my mum hadn't been as good as she was with me, I wouldn't have done well in school, because I did really well in school. I was really intelligent. I just could not concentrate. I could not, unless the teacher was engaging me or teaching me in a way that was slightly different to everyone else, which I get. Look, secondary school teachers, for example, teach hundreds of kids. They're not going to cater something directly to me. But the few teachers that did, I was massively engaged. I loved being in their classes. I loved learning from them, just because I learned in a slightly different way. Like, I really struggled to concentrate, so it had to be engaging for me to actually take an interest. But the bad behaviour comes with it, because, like, you're as a kid, you're very, like, you can't wait your turn for stuff. You shout out answers because you get impulsive urges. There's 2 types.
It's like Tourette's, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I'm not saying you, but like,
no,
that's similar to a.
It is. Tourette's is one of the things. If you have really bad ADHD, even as an adult, Tourette's is one of the things it can lead to. There's a few things that it can lead to. Tourette's is one of those. It's one of the compulsive disorders that's similar to Tourette's, etc. OCD. It can lead to these things in older age. And yeah, it is. There's 2 different types of ADHD, really. It's people who are just lack concentration, and people who lack concentration but are also very impulsive and hyperactive.
Isn't there's, because it's ADD, isn't it? So is that, I don't know the difference, to be fair, but it's obviously attention deficit disorder, and then that's attention
deficit hyperactivity disorder. But now I think it's just ADHD, and they sort of split it into 2 as opposed to having ADD and ADHD. But I sort of have both. Like, I don't lack, with like the ADD, it's more like you lack attention to detail and you can't concentrate. Your work's shit because it's rushed and you're not paying attention to it and sort of that stuff. whereas my work's good. I just struggle to concentrate. And then it was hyperactivity for me as well. Like, I was a massively hyper child, which you can then imagine when you're impulsive and when you're struggling to concentrate and when you shout out a lot because you get impulses, you do naughty things because you're impulsive and you're hyperactive. And that's something I struggled with massively, is I was just badly behaved. And that's how teachers see it, of course. But that was why. And I don't think I knew when I was diagnosed as a kid. Like, I was told growing up you have ADHD. I don't think I necessarily knew. I knew that I was different in terms of, you know, I knew that I got in trouble a lot more than other people. I knew that I acted slightly different to how most people act, etc. But I don't think I knew exactly what it was. And then I think when you grow up and you look at stories that other people who have ADHD say, or look at the symptoms, you just sort of think like, yeah, like that was me to a T. But they put you on Ritalin.
I was literally gonna ask, were you or are you still medicated, and why not?
It was hard growing up with ADHD, right? Just because of the reasons I've said, constantly being in trouble, being impulsive, being hyperactive constantly. Like, I needed something constantly to keep me stimulated, otherwise I'd look to be stimulated, and that often resulted in me getting in trouble. And when I said a moment ago, if I hadn't had my mum, like, I used to vandalise things and shit. Like, I was a naughty kid. No, like, I used to, when I was like sort of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, like in those ages, I got like an impulse out of doing stuff that I knew was very wrong. And if I wasn't kept engaged, that's the sort of stuff I'd do. And I do think that if my mum hadn't been as good as she was with me, you know, I didn't always have the best friends, etc. I think I probably would have been.
Yeah, sorry, that's got to be some sort of environmental influence as well. Because you think you've probably got plenty of kids that have got ADHD that don't do those things.
Yeah, but it does link. If
it doesn't take much convincing. It's like if you...
It takes no convincing. If that's what I mean. If that's in front of you, if you've got ADHD and you live in fucking Cheshire or live in Richmond and you go to posh private school, you're not going to have.
Rather than,
You're not going to have that. Whereas, obviously, But I just think, so while it was difficult growing up with it, I would have preferred to be not medicated. After a certain age, I think it helps to a certain point, but the medication, the side effects are horrendous. Like, it just made me feel like a fucking zombie. Because what it does is it dulls your impulsiveness, it dulls your hyperactivity, it dulls the lack of attention. So what it essentially makes you do is you just sit there. Then that's it. That's how I felt taking it. I hated fucking taking it. The best thing, it used to wear off towards the afternoon, and the afternoons were the only part of my day I enjoyed. Like, that's how bad it was, is because I would just sit there. At lunch, I'd sit with my friends and just say nothing. I wouldn't eat. I lost loads of weight at one point because they put a higher dose, to the point where my mum was like, when I was like 8, my mum was worried about me, and she took me back and was like, he's fucking skin and bone, he won't eat. He only eats dinner, like he won't eat during the day.
Appetite suppressant as well, then?
Yeah, massively. So... It can do both. Apparently, for me, it just had that effect, but it can do both to people. It can make you eat more, or it can make you less hungry. But I just didn't... While I get what the drug is designed to do, and it's designed to dull what your ADHD symptoms, essentially, and just reduce them a bit. But I felt like it sort of took away my personality. Like, it just... I'm quite a loud person. I'm quite a talkative person. I wasn't. I would just sit there in silence. I like being, telling jokes, being funny, or taking the piss out of people, or have the piss taken out of me. I didn't. I didn't do that while I was on it. I would just sit there in class, for example, and just listen. And it did the job in terms of the education, because I'm a smart person anyway. But when I was then forced to just basically sit there and concentrate, it helped my education a bit. Basically, and that's what it's meant to do. And so it helped me get like good grades in primary school. It helped me perform well in school in early parts of secondary school. But eventually I can't even remember how old I was. I think I was literally 13 or 14, and I said to my mum, I really don't want to be on this anymore. And she said, why? And I just said, because it makes me feel like a fucking zombie. Like, I just sit there and do nothing all day. I don't have fun at lunch. That's something I struggled with. I didn't want to in primary school you play. I didn't want to play. Like I just sat there like a fucking mindless retard. I didn't eat during the day. I concentrated a lot more in class, yes, but I didn't like it, and maybe it works differently with other people. I'm sure everyone gets different symptoms, but for me, it did the job of what it was meant to do in terms of making me concentrate more and calming me down and stuff. But I felt like a medicated person in like a fucking hospital. Like, have you seen the Tom Hardy film with the craze?
Yeah.
You know when one of them is in the thing and he's just sat there, people are sat there like,
Yeah.
because they're medicated. That's how I felt a lot of the time. And I said to my mum, I really don't want to take, like, I'll work on trying to be.
Was you suggested to go like therapy instead?
No, I had a paediatrician, which is like a doctor for children, and I just still used to have meetings with her, and she'd ask me how I'm getting on. She'd find out from the school how I'm getting on, from my mum how I'm getting on, and she would teach me ways to deal with things, and teach me ways to concentrate a bit more. But she was really nice. She was really good, and they were supportive. They said, "Yeah, look, if you want to come off it, come off it." Like, I used to love weekends because I wasn't on it.
Oh,
That's how.
Did you only have to take it while you was at school?
No, well, you can take it as much as you want. You don't have to take it. They prescribe it to you and say, "We think you need this." But like, fucking my old man used to make me take it on weekend, because obviously my parents were divorced. He'd make me take it on weekends if I was at his, just to fucking shut me up. No, just to shut me up. It used to do my head in, because I hated being on it. And also, I think you mature as you get older. So I've still got like you could still tell I'm a bit hyper in certain situations now, and I'm still talkative, I'm still loud, I still struggle to concentrate, etc. But as you get older, obviously it becomes sort of a bit easier. But certainly at school, it was difficult to deal with at school, because, like I say, by teachers you were just seen as a naughty shit. They didn't put a lot of effort into trying to understand what was actually wrong, what was going on in your head, because it is a mental disorder, and it's like you can't change it. Do you know what I mean? You can't. It's just always there, and that's how you are. So it was more a struggle at school because of the teachers than being at school. Because, like I say, when I had teachers that actually understood and made an effort, I performed really well, and I engaged because I really enjoyed being taught by them. Like, I had one teacher when I was a bit older, even, because, like, going back to the defiance thing is, you know, I didn't like being told what to do. I didn't like things if it wasn't fair. But obviously, when you're a kid, it doesn't have to be fair, does it? No. You know, the adult's telling you, and I could never get with that. And I had one teacher who was really good to me in secondary school, who said, like, in my lessons, because we used to clash, she was really like a strong woman. She wouldn't have any of my rudeness, but she knew what I was going through, but she wouldn't stand for it. But she basically said to me, if you're feeling like you're going to have a outburst, she used to call it an outburst, because I used to obviously get sent out loads and fucking shout at teachers, swear at teachers, argue with teachers, etc. She was like, if you feel like you need to have an outburst and you need to have a minute, if you feel like something I've done is unfair, or I've spoken to you rudely, or you're not engaged in the lesson, step out for 5 minutes. You know, go and keep yourself engaged with something else, go for a walk, whatever, and come back. And she was then, when other teachers would complain about me, she'd say, do that. Come and get me if you want. I'll go speak to him. But you need to find a way to deal with him. He is an intelligent geezer. He wants to learn, blah, blah, blah. But you're not dealing with him correctly. He's not going to... And she would say... She was once she was speaking to a teacher in front of me. And she was just like, I don't care. Like, I'm the teacher. I will speak to him how I please. And she was like, no, you won't. Because he's not going to have that. Oh, I'm an adult. He's a 13-year-old, blah, blah, blah. And she was just like, yeah... Unfortunately, that's not the way his brain works. He doesn't care that you're an adult. He doesn't care that you're a teacher, that you're in a position of power. If you speak to him rudely, if you blah, 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 he's not going to respond well. So either tell him to leave for 5 minutes or speak to him differently, blah, blah, blah. And she actually really fought my corner, and I really appreciated that. And I think she learnt those things from my mum when I was like in year 7 and 8, because she taught me, used to clash with her. She used to give me detention. So she had a long meeting with my mum once, and I think she said to my mum, because she cared though, because she didn't just want to go to detention, go in isolation. And she spoke to my mum, asked the best ways to deal with me, she understood ADHD. Like, she now works in a SEND school, and you know what I bumped into her in Sainsbury's during COVID, and do you know what she said? So do you know what a SEND school is?
Yeah,
Special needs, right? Special education needs. She said, I said, how is it working in a SEND school? Like, I bumped into her. She was catching up with her. How is it working at a SEND school now? And she said, oh, can I be really honest with you? And I went, go on. She went, a lot of the kids in there are very, very similar to you. And dealing with you taught me very, very well how to deal with a lot of them kids. And I was just like, oh, brilliant. Thanks for that. Yeah, no, that's what I said, thanks. But it shows you how serious and how similar ADHD is to some. She said, like,
I suppose if it's a mental disability, special education needs, 90% of them, although they'll have physical disabilities, they'll, all of them, I say all of them, but yeah, they all will have it because they can't.
You can't
work
help
at
it.
A normal pace. And you can get a disabled kid that can still like read and write and that, but special needs schools can't, innit?
But she said that she gets autistic kids that are really similar to ADHD kids, and she gets people with this that are really, really similar to hyperactivity and this, that, and the other. And that's what she said to me. She was like, it was a really good learning curve for me. Dealing with students, like, she was like, obviously you weren't the only one with ADHD or educational needs in the school, but it gave me a good bit of experience. But I think, the medication, I chose to come off that, to answer your question, just because it makes you really, really docile. And while I got I was pretty badly behaved, I was struggling to concentrate, I was hyperactive, I was loud, I was boisterous, energetic, and you can't always deal with that 24/7. I think it got to a point where I thought perhaps I've matured a bit more now as well. And don't get me wrong, when I came off of it, I noticed a massive difference in terms of getting into a bit of trouble again. If I was hyper, especially after lunch, because you're hyper. So, say you've played football at lunch, you've been chilling with your mates at lunch, you come back into the class, right, and you're then ready to you sit down again. Whereas that hyperactivity rolls over for me. Yeah. And I could not come in from lunch and sit down and learn. I could not do it. So I used to get in trouble in afternoons, not in the mornings, because that hyperactivity for me then extends, and I want to continue doing it, and I've still got that energy.
To like what extent though? Because that, again, that's one of those things that rolls across the board. If you look at schools on average, kids get in trouble more in afternoons because they come in, everyone's all hot and bothered and all things like that. So yeah, I mean, obviously, to what extent is it to the point that you're getting sent out every time, or?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I really struggled. When I got older, though, it's easier to just not do any work, because, like, year 11, even in sixth form, I could go into fifth period and just not really do anything, because you're not treated the same as you are in, like, year 7. But, like, to the point where in the morning I'd be fidgety, I'd lack concentration, but by the afternoon, especially after lunch, it was like game over for me. I could not concentrate, didn't want to listen, didn't want to learn, and that's because I've had energy. But then if you haven't done anything that energetic at lunch, I could come in and I was fine. So it's just that. But it like things like sugar, like, you know, like kids get sugar rush. Like, mine was just fucking intensified. My mum used to only let me have. She tells this funny story. There's these quarter pound of chicken burgers that I eat that are really nice. Like, they've been my favourite since I was a kid. And she said we started eating those because I had to find foods that had less colorances or less MIG or something. Because she was like, the way it reacted to you.
E numbers.
Yeah, something like that.
Mainly sweets and that, innit?
Yeah, but in a lot of, like, processed foods and burgers and stuff like that, there's whatever is in there is in them.
So, with the ADHD thing though, do you ever think, as if that's not the only thing we've been talking about this whole time, but do you ever think, or did you ever use it as like an excuse to get out of things, or did you ever be like something you weren't interested in, but it had nothing to do with your ADHD? Did you ever play up and kind of play to it?
Nah, I was embarrassed by it. Like, I was embarrassed by like, I'd never told anyone I was on Ritalin or anything. Like, it was embarrassing to me. I didn't mention it to teachers. I didn't mention it to people to try and make up for. It was It's also sporadic. Like you say about use it as an excuse to get out something you don't want to do or a subject you're not in. Like, I could be in a class with one of those teachers in a subject that I would really engage with a teacher that's dealing with me really well, but for one reason or another, I cannot concentrate today. I'm getting frustrated today. I and it could happen in any lesson. It wasn't just stuff that I didn't want to do. It's obviously intensified when it's something that engages you less so. But I used to clash with even the teachers that dealt with me well. I used to lack concentration even in the subjects I enjoyed and I was engaged. And I think people do have this attitude of, it's an excuse, or it's just naughty, it's this, it's that, and I heard
that's what I'm not saying you would have or people do, but you kind of you look to, because a lot of people will use a lot of things to be like, well, I can't do that because of so and so or whatever. They'll use their thing as like a way to get through life without having to do much, sort of thing.
But I think in this day and age, I imagine with how people are now, I mean, we've spoken about similar things before about, parents never accepting any wrongdoing and this, that and the other. I can imagine that ADHD is massively overused now. But you've got to remember, I grew up in a period where teachers thought you were just a naughty little shit. A lot of my teachers didn't believe in ADHD. I'm sure they all do now because it's a much bigger thing. I had teachers that didn't even believe ADHD was a thing, teachers who were older and always just knew it. It used to be called
up to like what age though? When throughout your whole school or
massively
primary school? Did you go? Were you in South Africa when you was in primary school?
Yeah, both. But my primary school teachers, I had 2 primary school teachers or nursery teachers in South Africa. They were friends with my mum because my mum taught at the school. So my mum told them how to deal with me and they were fine. But no, teachers didn't believe in it. It was just naughty kids. So I imagine now it's probably overused, and probably there is naughty kids that lack a bit of concentration that probably don't need to be diagnosed or medicated, but it's just used as a thing to explain their behaviour. But I was diagnosed in a period where my mum had to tell the paediatricians, I think he has ADHD, these are the symptoms, this is what's happening with him, this is what he's been like as a child, blah blah blah. They then ran test after test after test, like and I had to be in tests where they test my behaviour in certain situations and blah blah blah, and then they diagnosed me because it wasn't a big thing. So now it's probably overused, and now it probably is used to justify behaviour. But back then it couldn't be used to justify behaviour because half the teachers didn't think it was a thing. Half the teachers couldn't be bothered to deal with you, and I think all kids struggle with concentration. Some kids are hyper, some kids are this, some kids are that. But when you have ADHD, it's not only intensified, but like any what's it called when you any symptom with ADHD, every symptom you can possibly think of, hyperactivity, loudness, this, that and the other, lack of concentration, trouble sleeping, you could name 10 to 15 symptoms, for example. Someone who has ADHD will have all 15 happening to them every single day, whereas your kids who are hyperactive might have a couple. You might have kids that struggle sleeping, or adults that struggle sleeping, or obsessive or compulsive or impulsive or whatever. Everyone may have a couple of things. You know how they always say that everyone's on the spectrum of autism in some facet. You all have one or another. ADHD, probably there's loads of kids that have certain symptoms, but someone with ADHD, like if I went and read out a symptom list, I'd be able to say that when I was a kid, especially on a daily basis, I had every single one. And that's the difference. It's not only that hyperactivity is, and that lack of concentration and that trouble sleeping is intensified. I think it's also that it's a combination of all of the above that just goes round, and it makes you massively difficult to deal with from a teacher's point of view, I'd imagine. Massively difficult to deal with from a parental point of view. My kids will probably have ADHD because it runs in the family. And they said when I got diagnosed, a lot of what the paediatrician said about me as a child, my dad said, that was literally me as a child, but it wasn't a thing then. It wasn't diagnosable then. So I'll probably have, you see where I lack patience and I struggle with things still. I'll struggle, even though I've been through it and I understand what's going through that kid's head, I'll struggle to raise and have the patience to deal with a child with ADHD. That will be something that I'll need to work on because I lack patience and because I want you to concentrate, even though when I was a kid and you're telling me concentrate, I wouldn't be able to.
I suppose that you've got to be a better parent.
No, yeah, of course, and I will happily. But yeah, I think it's just massively intensified, to answer your question, and that's the difference between, I think, a kid just being badly behaved. You know, it's incontrollable. I could have had the worst you could tell me, right, you are going to get the worst punishment known to human race, right? But a situation occurs, I have an impulse to react in a certain way. Do first, ask questions later. I know there's a consequence coming. I don't care. Like, because there's an urge inside me, I cannot control not doing it, and that's what I was like as a kid, massively. I knew I was going to get a clap from my dad or something, but I could not stop myself from doing it. Like the defiance thing.
Is that not more like leaning towards the Tourette side of things, like, as well? I don't know if it is. I actually don't know. Is ADHD? Let's Google it. Is it a form of Tourette's? Because Tourette's covers like a wide. Oh yeah, two separate conditions, but they have a few things in common. They often start around the same age, and in some cases, children have both conditions. Maybe you have a bit of both.
I think that even, it sounds weird, but what's it called, OCD?
Yeah.
There was a bit on EastEnders classic about OCD where this kid, you know, Bobby Bill, he would like, he was doing things like when he turned a light on or off, he would turn it on 4 times. I did that as a kid. So that's what I mean. I think there are things that you can probably find Tourette's that link to ADHD. There are OCD things that I used to twitch a bit, like constantly fiddle, because that comes to the lack of concentration. You know, like people who shake or tap, or like I used to do that loads, and because it's that excessive movement constantly. You cannot sit still. Like you physically cannot. Like someone could try and hold you still when you're constantly moving. And I couldn't help it. Like I used to. In car journeys, I used to rock my head. Every single car journey as a child. From young till I was about literally 16, I used to literally rock my head. I could not sit still. But yeah, I used to do things like that, like turn the lights on and off a certain amount of time, and do things a certain amount of times, tap things a certain amount of time. So a lot goes through your head, like as a kid, and that's not something, of course, that I continued doing for longer than, say, childhood. I couldn't really tell you when I stopped with, you know, the light thing and the pressing something a certain amount of times, but you can link in. Like I looked up earlier, and it does say like conditions that it can lead to in adulthood are like similar things like Tourette's, autism, sleep problems, depression, conduct disorder. This often involves a tendency towards highly antisocial behaviour, oppositional defiance disorder, anxiety disorder. So there's loads of stuff that I guess you have similar symptoms to. Yeah. But yeah, it was just tough to deal with. But go on, what did you actually bring it up for? You said you'd listen to something.
This is what I'm just looking up now. Basically, I was listening to a podcast about like education and young boys in education and that, and it was saying that a large percentage of young boys nowadays are diagnosed with ADHD, but the guy on this podcast, he's was he a psychologist or like a children's doctor? I can't remember, one or the other, but he dealt a lot with younger kids, and he was basically saying he just thinks it's like a like crux for the schooling system to subdue young boys, in the sense of boys technically, like, no, this isn't fucking like every boy, not every girl, but boys in general will be a lot more hyperactive. They'll be a lot more boisterous. Mentally, they don't mature as fast. So telling a 4-year-old boy to sit down and do nothing versus a 4-year-old girl is two different things, because the girl's more mature and understands that, yes, you sit well, you'll get rewarded as a result, and that, whereas the boy might have, for argument's sake, the mental age of a 2-year-old. Don't think it's that slow. It's not that slow, but they mature at different paces and things like that. But yeah, this guy was saying that the way the schooling system works now is very anti boys doing their thing. But yeah, so they basically this percentage thing is, so this is only in America, to be fair, at the moment, but during their lifetimes, boys, an average of 13% of men will be diagnosed with ADHD, whereas it's just 4.2% of women. 13. Doesn't seem like, but that's a high amount of people. If you look at the population as a whole,
I was going to say, when I was a kid, it was probably, again,
like point something.
I had a couple other people who I knew growing up in primary school and what have you, that were diagnosed with ADHD as well. Like, it was a lot less than 13, I'd say. But that's what I mean. I don't doubt that it has probably got a lot more common now.
But that's the thing. But that's what I'm saying. This is why I wanted to ask you about it, what it was like growing up with it and that. Because I do think I could see it as well. Like, no, and obviously I've got my little sisters and that. And I've seen like kids at the parties, and some of them, they're like, oh yeah, they've got this and that. I'm like, have they really? Or are they just a bit of a naughty kid or something, and it's kind of like over medicated, undereducated sort of thing. It's just like, let's just label them with something, so then we could be like, oh, it's not their fault, it's so and so. Because all these kids that you label with ADHD and all stuff like that, you stick them in front of a PlayStation or give them an iPad or something, they're gone. They're solely focused on that. They're not, after an hour or so, chucking that down and trying to do something else. So yeah, it's this is the argument of this guy that was on this podcast as well. He was saying that, yeah, you actually sit down and try and teach these kids and try and engage with them, and that most of them don't have ADHD, and the ones that do don't even need the medication. They just need to be dealt with in the right ways.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
Because you're just, like, I can imagine, like you said, you're just creating a race of zombies that will just sit there and make people's lives easier.
I agree that the best years I had of my schooling life and the best experiences I had with teachers were ones that knew what ADHD was, asked my mum best way, or had experience dealing with that sort of behaviour already, and engaged me and taught me in a different way than perhaps they taught everyone else in the class, and engaged me in a different way. Like, my year 6 teacher, for example, she called me like a TA, and she just, every job, if there was a PowerPoint, she'd put me in charge of doing the PowerPoint. If there was something to be done, like a display, she'd get me to do it. If she needed stuff moved around the classroom, she'd ask me to do it.
Was you one of those big strong boys that carried the chairs around?
But like everything like that, she would make me involved in, like, almost the centerpiece of most things that she did. She would involve me, and then I was engaged, because I wasn't just sit there at the back of the class being expected to listen to this fucking presentation and take notes on this bollocks and do this. I was the one clicking the presentation forward, or and even that, she was such a great teacher. She worked out ways to basically involve me and engage me, etc. But even then I sometimes struggled, and that's how bad it is. But like stuff like that, it is about teachers. That is better than medication. However, like I say, that's primary school. They teach one class. I get it. When you get to secondary school, while I wish all my teachers had been like the few really good ones I had, when you're teaching 10 classes a day, you have a form, and then you teach, I don't know, 5 or 6 classes, so not 10, but maybe 7 classes that you deal with per day. Are you really bothered about tailoring 4 lessons a week that you have to do to class fucking A, where one of the kids has ADHD and can't engage and can't concentrate and is hyper? Are you that bothered about tailoring your teaching style to suit that person, or to do something slightly different for that person? Because you might then have one in your year 9 class and one in your year 10 class. It is a lot, and that's, I think, why they would rather medicate someone with Ritalin, because then they'll just sit there and concentrate. Yeah. But well, I do think that now it probably is over. But that's like anything. Like, what people say the whole thing about, you know, do you have ADHD, or like that article, or are you just naughty? People would have said that about autism back in the day. You're just a difficult child. People would have said that about every single, like back in the day when you had the alienists cutting open people's brains because they had disabilities and they wanted to understand what it was. At some point in time, absolutely everything has been seen at that way as you're the freak, you're the weirdo, you're the outcast, you're not normal. The only thing is with ADHD, it's more recent. It's more recent that people have gone, well, they're not just badly behaved. There's something there that's making it impossible for this kid to concentrate, impossible for him to engage with this, impossible for him to keep his mouth shut, impossible for him to stop moving and wanting to, you know, have energy all the time or whatever. It's just more of a recent thing. But I do then think you are right in terms of, there probably are some teachers and probably are some schools who think, they don't actually look into ADHD too much maybe, and think, boisterous naughty kid, he must have ADHD. It probably does happen, and it's a shame, because I think it does then take away from kids who actually do have it. And like you said, whoever you were talking about that podcast, if you sit down and engage with them, if I told you what to look out for ADHD, right, or just about my experiences, and you went and sat down with 10 kids, and let's say a few of them had ADHD, I guarantee you could tell which ones actually had ADHD compared to not.
Yeah. But I suppose when you start medicating and things like that, especially from a young age, you probably wouldn't, because they're all just going to be absolute fucking like mindless kids. Even if you've got a kid that is just a hyperactive young child. The thing I actually asked, the reason I asked you about this is because obviously you're a boy. And well, as far as I know, you're a boy. This is 2023, Bill. You might identify as a fucking sofa or something, but yeah, it was just mad. The stats this guy was reading about how young lads are almost just soon as they can't concentrate in class, it's like, oh fuck it, yeah, they've got ADHD. Let's medicate them, or let's separate them from everyone else. When I think if you look at it down the line, it probably doesn't help that child, because all it does is damage their relationship with education. Just because you can't concentrate all the time doesn't mean that you can't concentrate, and you can't. If you take away like whatever education's broken, it doesn't do a lot. It is a lot of like, it's formative years for a lot of kids, and if all you're doing straight away is just fucking drug them up and separate them from everyone else, look later in life, they might be less likely to go university. They might be less likely to push for more challenging careers, because they're like, oh fuck, if I couldn't make it in school, what fuck knows what am I going to do when I've got a boss shouting at me or whatever, and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't necessarily agree with the medicating. I think the only time I would see it may be beneficial to medicate them is for a couple of years when they're a bit younger, primary school age, in those years where it's like extremely flared up, just to get them to sort of settle down and concentrate a bit more. But I don't agree with the medicating. As someone who's had it, I preferred being off it, and yeah, I got into more trouble off it, and I struggled to concentrate off it, etc. But I then also had some teachers that dealt with me really well, and the medication thing, it does just make, but like I say, it may not do that to everyone, but how it made me feel was just like an antisocial fucking zombie. Not wanting to have fun, not wanting to play, not wanting to go and play football with your mates, not wanting to do anything, not speaking even, like it, because I'm very loud and outspoken, what have you, and I didn't even want to speak, like so I really did not like how it made me feel. And I think if they are just over medicating kids to get them to pipe down a bit and behave, it isn't good. I think teachers should be given training on, at the end of the day, if you get someone who's autistic coming into your school in year 7, the teachers that are going to have to deal with that year 7 are given training on how to deal with autism. Okay, it has to be done. When you get someone, why isn't that done with ADHD? If you have someone that's diagnosed with ADHD and this is what makes them tick, this is what makes them concentrate, etc., why isn't there that same level of, yeah, you don't have to medicate the fucker. This is what makes him tick. This is what keeps him engaged. He doesn't like this, he likes this, whatever. The same thing happens with autistic people. Why can't it happen with ADHD? Why can't they just be given an extra bit of training where the teachers are then more comfortable dealing with that student in their classroom, as opposed to just medicating them or excluding them? I think that's a better way to go, because that allows them kids to still have a personality. Like, can you imagine me as a child? Like, it's easier to deal with that now. As a child, not really understanding why during the day when I'm on that medication I don't want to speak, I don't want to play with my mates, I don't feel hungry, I don't shout out, Can you imagine a child, like, in my head, I used to just think, why is this happening? You couldn't put the link between, until I got a bit older and I said it's this fucking medication. But that's a lot for a child to have to deal with. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Especially in younger school kids as well. Is it just doing more damage than anything else?
But I think potentially, yeah. But again, our teacher's gonna all of a sudden think, cool, I'm going to tailor my lesson. That's what I mean. It is a lot, especially for secondary school teachers. It's a lot because you teach so many students and you have so much on. I do appreciate that probably half of them think, no, like, I don't want to have to do that in every single lesson. And it is easier for them to have a medication that's going to make those kids a bit more docile and more conformative, etc. But yeah, I think it does probably do more harm than good.
And do you, so as like briefly mentioned it at the start, but it's like, do you know, you get some adults as well. I see it fucking on Instagram and whatever. People are like, oh, I've got ADHD or something like that. And or you see the videos of if you could have ADHD, if you have this and that. And I've seen the videos and I'm like, well, yeah, I do those things. I'm like, but there's no way I've got ADHD. Does it ever piss you off when you read things like that, or you see people that are like, 100% got ADHD? Because I don't think it's that difficult to get medicated. It's like getting testosterone medication. If you it's not that hard.
It's not that hard. It's something they prescribe to people with ADHD, but you can go to them without ADHD and say, I struggle concentrating, can I have this? It's not difficult.
It's like a concentration drug, in it. So I can imagine a lot of time. Maybe not so in England. I feel like the system's a bit more rigorous, but like in places like America and stuff like that.
In England, it's harder, obviously, than the States, but it does annoy me, yeah, because again, I said earlier, I don't really have the words to articulate how I always felt as a kid, and I don't have the words to articulate how it made me feel as a kid and what went through my head every day. I don't really have the words to articulate it, but I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something that was different about me to other people in terms of how I learned, how I went about things. And it does annoy me because I think people now do think, now that ADHD is a bigger thing, people are just like, oh yeah, I lack concentration, I've got ADHD. Oh yeah, I'm a bit hyper sometimes. Yeah, I have ADHD. And it's just like, there's so much more to it than that. Like I said to you, it's having not one or two symptoms, it's having like all fucking 15 going through your head every single day. And it does annoy me a bit, but I just think, well, I don't really care if you want to claim to have it, you have it. But I guarantee you in school you were fine, and you just went about your business and struggled to concentrate, maybe like every kid. But it's different. But I think that will happen more over the years. Sorry, because it's become more regular and more common.
Yeah, but has it become more common? Obviously, like there's more awareness around it, but has it actually become more common? I'm not saying you have the answer to this. It's just a question. Has it become more common, or is it people are just being like, fuck it, it's easier to say he's got ADHD, then I don't have to, if he's an arsehole or something like that, or I'm saying he or she, whatever, if the kid's naughty or something like that, you'd be like, that's all right, he's got ADHD, let's treat him differently.
Yeah, what I'd say to you though is I don't think that there will 100%, in this day and age, there'll be more people getting diagnosed with ADHD than there was when I was a kid. There's definitely an uptick in that regard. However, parents who say, oh, he has ADHD, I guarantee a lot of them haven't been diagnosed. Like, you've got to remember, you're diagnosed with ADHD. You don't just decide you have it one day. The same way you're diagnosed with autism, you have to have meetings with a paediatrician who analyses you, gets reports from your school, communicates with you, right, as a child, and decides, okay, I think this child has ADHD.
I suppose it's very easy to self-diagnose, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's an actual diagnosis. You get told by a paediatrician that, this is what you have, and this is what we can do for you, and this is ways to make it better, and this is blah, blah, blah. You show tendencies of X and Y and Z, and you have X of the symptoms, and having communicated you and watch how we dealt with that situation. Like, there's a lot more to it than, I think the word ADHD is thrown around a load now, but I guarantee, what you said earlier about if, every kid has ADHD, but I guarantee if you actually spoke to them, only a couple of them do. I guarantee you that only a couple of them have actually been diagnosed by a paediatrician to have ADHD, whereas others, it's just an easy thing to clutch at. Like, my mum says to me sometimes, because again, she's a teacher and she knows what to look for, and she'll say like, there's a child in my class who definitely has ADHD, like definitely ticks all the boxes, but he hasn't been tested. So it's not that big that every parent tests a kid.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, you look on the flip side that there's probably a lot of kids that do fall through the cracks because you just got a kid, their parent just punishes them to the extent that they're literally like fucking scared to open their mouth.
No, that's not ADHD. That's what I mean.
Surely there's got to be extents to it, like you said with the autism, though.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, but from my experience, that was the main thing, is that like I could get punished in any way any way you punish me, I wouldn't care. Like, there was something that was in me that it went completely out of my mind when thinking about doing something or thinking about getting the urge to say something or do something. I didn't care about the repercussions at all. No matter how severe, how much trouble I thought I would get in, I did not care at all. But I mean, yeah. Again, that's just I'm just saying how it sort of was for me. I guess, like, you're right. Like with anything, like you say, there will be people on different ends of the spectrum that deal with things differently. The medication does different things to them, etc. But it is something that I think needs more awareness in terms of, like I say, teachers being taught how to deal with it better as opposed to just medicate them up.
Let's wrap it up there. Episode 15. Done and dusted. Sweet. Cheers. Clink.